Hey everyone, Jeff here from Films at Home, and I've got 5 4K reviews of recent horror movie releases just in time for October and spooky season that I'll be covering in this one horror movie roundup video. Hey everyone, thanks for coming back to the channel. I know it's been about a month since I posted a video, but as you probably know, I was moving. I moved across state lines, a 3-bedroom house, lots of stuff to pack up, my collection, a 1-year-old. It took a while. We're still not fully unpacked, but I finally have my TV set up, a new LG OLED C2 TV for my review station. Got all the speakers hooked up, and it's finally time to do reviews. So in this video, I have 5 recent 4K releases, all within the horror genre that I want to bring to you guys here in a 4K roundup because I know I've missed them over the last few weeks. Starting things off, we've got The Lost Boys and Poltergeist. I've also got the Friday the 13th 4K release from Paramount. I've also got the Scream 2 4K Steelbook from Paramount. And to round things out, I've got I Know What You Did Last Summer on 4K from Sony. So I'm going to cover those a little bit quicker than my typical review. I'll give about 2 to 3 minutes to each of those titles, but I will still give you a breakdown on visuals, audio, special features, and whether or not these are worth picking up for your collection. So with no time to waste, let's jump right into the first title, which is going to be Poltergeist here on 4K from Warner Brothers. Now, this is a new 4K transfer that was completed from the 35mm film source. So it's brand new, graded with HDR10 color grading, and it also packs a new audio track. Now the 4K release here of Poltergeist is pretty impressive. I had the older Blu-ray, and it was one of the real old Blu-rays, probably like 2010, 2011 I think it came out. Didn't have a great encode, didn't have a great transfer, and many times to me it felt like it was just a slight upgrade over DVD, as many of those early Blu-rays can tend to look. So getting a new 4K scan here, 35mm source, it looks incredible on 4K, especially with HDR. The film grain, excellent, much more consistent than on the Blu-ray, looks and feels like a movie shot on film, has a really consistent grain structure, great detail, very sharp picture. But the color grading is also a massive upgrade. Of course, black levels, contrast, and brightness all drastically improved, but the colors here, where they do pop, are also very nice, and I think that the HDR helps with some of these darker sequences, especially if you're watching it in a dark room. If you've got the OLED TV, let me tell you, it looks great. Black levels are awesome, and even some of the scenes towards the end of the movie, outdoors, in the pool, some places where it could get really dark and a little bit muddy on the Blu-ray, look much better here on the 4K. Now the audio was also upgraded. Even though it's still a 5.1, they did a new audio remaster in DTS HD. The previous Blu-ray had a 5.1 Dolby True HD. They scrapped that, they started brand new, and I think they actually did a really nice job with this. You can tell that there's a bit of an upgrade there. Dialogue was a little more clear. I thought the surround channels were used a little better. It's just a better mix. And so not only do you get the great visuals, but even though we're not getting Atmos, you are getting a pretty markedly improved 5.1 experience with DTS HD. So I thought that was really great. Packaging, not so sure about this artwork. I would have liked something more classic, more original. Probably the girl sitting in front of the TV would have been it for me. Also has this warning about epilepsy, which, you know, I actually thought was nice in case you didn't watch this movie and you weren't aware of that. But it comes with the 4K, the Blu-ray, and the digital code. And for special features, there is nothing new here. Everything is ported over from the Blu-ray, but nothing new, and all the features are on the Blu-ray disc. So the real reason to buy this is to upgrade your visuals and your audio and get Poltergeist in what is probably the best that this movie will ever look, and is certainly the best it ever has looked on home video so far. Jumping to the next title, we've also got another Warner Brothers title, The Lost Boys, on 4K here, also with a new 4K transfer done from the 35mm negative with HDR10, no Dolby Vision or HDR10 Plus. The real benefit I thought for this release was actually the HDR because of the way that the colors popped. This is a Joel Schumacher movie. You know what Joel Schumacher, even if it's a horror movie, even if it's a little bit darker subject matter like The Lost Boys, you're going to get some really bright primary colors. And I thought that's where the HDR stood out on The Lost Boys and really gave this an elevated experience over what the Blu-ray gave us previously. Now, being that it's a new scan, it also has great detail. The grain structure, although I didn't think it was maybe as consistent as Poltergeist, it's very close. I thought it was solid. It still looks like film. It has that film look and feel. Grain resolves pretty well with 4K, especially with the new scan. But for me, the real highlight was the HDR, the added contrast and brightness, but also the way that those primary colors, the reds, the blues, the greens, they really pop off your screen now with HDR. And I think that's a huge reason to upgrade, although this is pretty much the best this movie will ever look again, and it is a nice improvement over the Blu-ray. Now, audio-wise, they did the same thing they did with Poltergeist. We have a DTS HD 5.1, where previously there was a Dolby True HD 5.1, but there isn't as much information on whether or not this was totally remastered or just switched to a different encode. So I'm not sure about this, but I did think that it sounded a little bit better. Could totally be placebo effect, just thinking that it was remastered or upgraded, but it did seem like it had a little bit better dialogue and maybe a little more surround action. The bass seemed to hit a little bit harder, some more low frequency there. You know, I'm not entirely sure because there weren't details on this, but either way, no Atmos, but a very solid 5.1, even if it isn't an upgrade. Maybe just the new version on DTS HD gives a better experience than Dolby True HD could. Packaging really quick. Again, don't love the slipcover. It's fine. The artwork's fine. They went with sort of an abstract artwork here, same on the inside, and then just like Poltergeist, you've got 4K, you've got Blu-ray, and you've got the digital code, and all the special features are ported over from the previous release, but nothing new here. So really the reason to upgrade again is your visuals. The HDR especially is what takes the Lost Boys to the next level, and I would recommend this one as well. So, going from Warner Brothers, now let's switch gears into Paramount, and we'll start things with Friday the 13th on 4K Blu-ray. Now, if you're aware of the Friday the 13th's history on home video, there was a great Scream Factory Collector's Edition box set that came out, I think, 2 years ago. That featured this movie with a 4K scan from the 35mm negative, and it looked great. When I reviewed that set, I thought Friday the 13th looked as good as it probably ever could. And looking at this 4K disc, I sort of have to agree with my original assessment. Now, while this does add Dolby Vision, it is coming from the same 4K transfer in that 35mm negative that was done for Scream Factory. So yes, on 4K, you get a little bit better, finer detail moments. You get a little bit better grain. But the thing is, this movie was already such a, it's a source issue. Not to say it's a bad source, but low budget horror movie, didn't have a lot of great camera equipment or lighting. And so it's sort of limited with how much 4K can do for it. The other thing you'll notice if you watch this, even for me, with the new OLED screen, with a room where I can completely control the brightness, I've got dimmer lights, I can turn off all the lights in this room, I'm in a basement, it is pitch black. It was very, very dark. It does have Dolby Vision HDR as well as just HDR10. HDR10 is a little bit better, in my opinion, in terms of the darkness, but that picture, it is pitch black. And if you're used to watching the Friday the 13th from Scream Factory, that's a much brighter, more vibrant image. Not to say it's super bright, still Friday the 13th, but this is a very, very dark disc. And so if you don't have an OLED screen or you don't have a room where you can completely shut off the lights and you're going to try to watch this in, say, your living room during the day, you're going to be better off with the Scream Factory release. You probably won't even be able to see most of this movie. It is very dark. Now, everything else is the same. The audio is the same as Scream Factory. The special features are all the same. The artwork is pretty standard. This is the Friday the 13th poster art, and it does not have a Blu-ray. So it's just the 4K with the digital code. I wonder if that's because Scream Factory still has the rights to releasing this on Blu-ray, but not 4K. Not really sure, but I have to say, of this bunch of 5, Friday the 13th on 4K was probably my least favorite. Not to say that it's bad, but it's definitely not a big enough upgrade over what was already a great Scream Factory for Blu-ray release to necessarily go out and drop $20. I think that's a hard sell for a lot of people, especially after you've dropped $100+ on that Scream Factory set. You're going to be pretty happy with what you have, and I think only the most hardcore home theater enthusiasts with totally pitch black rooms, high-end OLED screens, things like that, you may appreciate this, but I think the average consumer, this one's going to be a pass for them. So now, sticking with Paramount, we're moving over to a steelbook for Scream 2. Now, this also has a standard release. They sent me the steelbook. Pretty cool. The artwork on it is nice. But let's talk about the visuals and audio first. Now, there's no information on whether or not this was a new 4K scan. And looking at it, I think that it probably wasn't, but it definitely was remastered in one way or another, because the previous Blu-ray had a lot of marks on the film. It had scratches, it had dirt, it had little white specks and bubbles in the film. You would see that in the presentation. They've cleaned that up here, not in a bad way. No DNR was really, introduced, but they've definitely cleaned up the image, although it doesn't look sharp enough to say that they did a full rescan. I think this was just sort of a cleanup. Now, this does pack Dolby Vision, and the contrast and colors are greatly improved over the Blu-ray, which honestly had a kind of odd presentation. It almost did look a little artificial. The skin tones were off, the colors were off. It just didn't look right. I don't know what they did with that Blu-ray, but definitely comparing it on 4K, this is much more faithful to what I imagine was originally shown, say, in theaters, much more faithful to the original source versus the Blu-ray, which just seems like it was tinkered with a little bit too much. So given that I don't think this is a true 4K 35mm negative scan, it's not the sharpest compared to, say, Poltergeist or Lost Boys, which are even older than this movie, or even Friday the 13th. It's more on par with like somewhere between Friday the 13th and Poltergeist. It's not the sharpest, but it is much better than what we previously had available, and Dolby Vision definitely takes that image to the next level. Again, all the obvious things, the contrast, the brightness, the black levels, those are all great, but I thought that it really balanced the colors better and made for a more faithful presentation, which would be a great reason to upgrade. Now, everything else on this is the same, audio and special features, but obviously we have new packaging here. Now, I like the front packaging art. It is glossy, so you're going to get fingerprints, which you can probably already see, but it's got the people in the theater. On the back, hello Sydney, remember me, really nice artwork. And then on the inside, you do have some more art. I'll pop out a disc so you can see that. Be careful here with the 4K disc, but you've got some, the more traditional theatrical artwork on the inside, and your 4K and your Blu-ray also does come with a digital code. So it's a really nice set. I think the back of the steelbook is really fun. I love that. And it is definitely a worthy upgrade, but only because the previous Blu-ray was so bad. If I had to rate this compared to Poltergeist, Lost Boys, or Friday the 13th, I'd give it like a 7, 7.5, where Poltergeist and Lost Boys are like an 8.5, 9, and Friday the 13th is like a 6.5 or a 7. This is just a couple steps above Friday the 13th for me. Now, to round things out, we're going to Sony with the 25th anniversary, and this made me feel old, because I remember being a kid when this movie came out, and now we're getting a 25th anniversary release. I mean, I'm only going to be 30 next month, but even this is making me feel old. And it's I Know What You Did Last Summer on 4K. Now, for this release, we did get a brand new 4K scan from the 35mm negative, and it shows. Sony, personally, has been my favorite major studio when it comes to 4Ks. I think they've been the most consistently great studio. They clearly know what they're doing. They have sort of found the formula that works for their movies, and they always have great, sharp-looking 4K discs, and this is no exception. It looks incredible, and I think of the 5 movies here that I've shown you, this is the best looking of the bunch. It is near reference quality stuff. So it's going to give you a very film-like presentation, but that's great. Shot on film, we expect to see grain, but it's sharp, it's detailed. The grain is really well resolved across the image. You don't get any sort of blurriness, you don't get any sort of DNR or messiness with the grain, you don't get any issues there. It is clean, it is sharp, looks like a film print. The other thing this comes with is Dolby Vision, and let me tell you, that's amazing for this release, especially compared to the previous Blu-ray, which again, was done by Sony very early on, and then Mill Creek. It didn't have a great Blu-ray release. It had kind of bounced around a little bit. This is night and day over what we saw before. Black levels are perfect. Contrast, perfect. Primary colors, pop. Skin tones look much, much more natural. Everything just really hits the mark here with I Know What You Did Last Summer, and that's why it's my favorite of the bunch visually. Now, the other awesome thing about this is it's the only movie of this bunch that brought an Atmos track to the mix, and that is also reference quality. So that's what makes it my favorite release of the bunch. Not only are the visuals excellent in reference level, the audio is also reference level. Everything's super clear. Dialogue is great. You actually do get some nice movement around your sound setup. You do get some nice height speaker movement. You do get some nice surround movement. It's a really well mixed release. Pretty dialogue heavy, but even music sounds great. I mean, I can't imagine that this 4K disc could be made any better. I'm not sure how you can make this movie look or sound better. It's got to be as close to, you know, what it looked like if you had a pristine 35mm print back in 1997. Now, slipcover, pretty nice. I like this. It gives me like Scream Factory vibes with the way they put this together. You do get a Blu-ray and a digital code, and then special features. You do get deleted scenes, an interview with the director Jim Gillespie, and an interview with Muse Watson on the 4K, and then the Blu-ray brings over commentaries, director's short film Joyride with a commentary, a featurette, a music video, and then the theatrical trailer. So some of that stuff's been done before, but I Know What You Did Last Summer is absolute must-have reference quality, and if you haven't revisited this movie in a while, go back and watch it. It holds up. It's goofy. It's a late 90s movie, but it holds up, and it's a really, really fun horror movie that I think deserves more appreciation, and hopefully this 4K disc will do that for it because it's excellent. So that's it for the video. That's the 4K horror movie roundup here for October. 5 movies. All the links will be down in the description. Again, if I had to rank them, I'd go Friday the 13th is like a 6.5. I would say that Scream 2 is like a 7.5. Lost Boys and Poltergeist about an 8.5, 9, and I would say I Know What You Did Last Summer is a solid 10 out of 10 perfect disc. So check those out if you want to pick them up. The links are in the description. Links to Amazon, where it helps support my channel if you buy through those links, so I appreciate that. As always, make sure you're subscribed, and you can follow along on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and now I have a Facebook page going as well, so find all those links in the description. But we're getting close to 97,000 subscribers. In fact, by the time you guys see this video, I may have hit that mark. So 3,000 more to go. We have half of October, November, and December, 2.5 months to hit that 100,000 mark, which is the goal. So if you haven't subscribed yet, get on that, hit the subscribe button. Enjoy how great October is for 4K, especially horror. Some more great stuff to come. I have the Halloween set coming in. I will review that. Some other horror movies coming to 4K as well. I'll get on everything and get back up to date, so stay tuned for all of it. Thank you for bearing with me through the move and all the stuff that's been going on. Appreciate you guys. Love this community, and I'll be back very soon with more videos. So have a great rest of your day. Stay safe and healthy out there, and I'll talk to you soon.